the month of September 2021 as Literacy Month in the Northern Rockies Regional Municipality. September 2021 as Literacy Month in the Northern Rockies Regional Municipality. I couldn't have said it better myself. We're good. Admin report number 46, review of recreational fees and leisure access program. Speaking to the report is Ms. Gabrielle Jacobs. Ms. Jacobs, hello.
Hello, Mayor and Council. Before you is a report.
You're muted, Gabrielle.
I believe you're muted. Oh, there we are.
How is that now?
No. It's okay. We have a few technical problems here we're working through.
Try again, Gabrielle.
Hi there.
Okay, once again, Ms. Jacobs.
Hello.
Yes, working much better.
Perfect.
Excellent.
Well, hello, Mayor and Council. So before you is an administration report that comes from the April 26th council meeting. And at that time, we identified that the NRM does not currently have a bylaw to establish fees and charges at the rec center, local or regional parks, as well as other public facilities. So at this time, the report that you have in front of you now outlines options for establishing criteria for those recreation fees and services, as well as fees associated with regional parks and other public facilities. So in this administration report, you'll find that we've identified two main criteria that you may wish to explore further and look at options to adopt prior to establishing the fees for the Parks and Public Facilities Bylaw. So following my introduction of the administration report, Stacey's going to give a more detailed account of the two criteria that we have explored in this current report, followed by Krista, who will discuss the Leisure Access Program in more detail.
Very well. Stacey, would you like to take it away?
Thank you. As Gabrielle mentioned, we identified two criteria that we have historically utilized to determine our fees. Most of our fees right now have been determined by the community comparison method, with always an eye to cost on what it takes to run our services. So this is ideally going to just establish the baseline for us with Gabrielle's work that she's done with the bylaw, so that we have a fallback for determining new fees and for adjusting fees as they come up in the future. So then for consideration purposes, the figures that were added in there just highlight that we're not too far off community comparison already. So that would be one of the lower impacts for decision if we went with a community comparison. I believe the biggest impact would be our lifeguard programs, in particular the National Lifeguard and Bronze Cross that help us train new lifeguards. Knowing that going with one or the other option doesn't cement us into one particular decision, we could opt for allowing particular services like those to help us recruit new lifeguards. And I guess one other note in that is that we can also do a bit of a blend of the two should there not be a sufficient community comparison, say for a new service that other places don't offer. We could choose the cost recovery options.
Okay, thank you. Any questions, councillors, for either Ms. Jacobs or Ms. Aston? Councillor Andrews.
Was there a major increase in price with going with cost recovery on anything besides the National Lifeguard and Bronze Cross? I see it, the difference per class is 570 versus an average of 420. There's that one, but then the family lessons aren't a whole lot more really if we went cost recovery, right?
Right. Yeah, that seems consistent, that rate. It's slightly below cost recovery.
Would you see any potential hurdles if we went with the cost recovery? Like pushback from the community?
A raise in cheese would definitely generate some concern.
Definitely.
Knowing that the following conversation with the leisure access program, we do have programs in place to offset those considerations. Yeah.
Any other questions? Councillor Roper.
I think as a municipality, we're constantly trying to outdo other communities to try to attract new community members. And I think one of the things that people look for when they're trying to decide where to raise their families are affordable activities for their children and for themselves to do. So I like to stay within the average. For myself, I would like to be comparable to other communities, not depending on our cost, because I think our cost here could be a lot higher than other communities that are maybe not in Fort Nelson. So yeah, that's my thoughts, is that I think we should be comparative for sure.
Any other thoughts? Okay, thank you. So Councillor Roper, are you looking at option number 2? I'm sorry, option number 1. We are comparative to other municipalities in the region. And what are your thoughts on the lifeguarding? I note that we've always had a problem recruiting lifeguards, and I noticed our national lifeguard fees and our Bronze Cross fees are lower than other municipalities. My personal feeling is that we should keep them lower in order to attract lifeguards to staff our rec center. And other than that, I'm good with everything else in there. One other item I've got is there was 246 people that availed themselves of low-income family assistance. Was somebody going to speak to low-income family assistance? Ms. Pearson?
Thank you, everyone. Yeah, with the leisure access program, we're just finding it's a bit dated in terms of numbers. So I believe it was 2015 that the last numbers were updated, and they haven't had a program in place to keep them updating. So I found quite a few people that are kind of just on the brink, and they have complained because they'd like to be able to access the program, but they're just shy of that number. So a lot of work went in the past for that 2015 report that was done to give recommendations to mayor and council on the threshold. And those numbers took into account, and Jaylene can help me out more, but I know they took into account rent, just cost of living in Fort Nelson. It was more community-based than just general, and looking at indexes like provincial or federal numbers. So we felt like there was a lot of work that already went into those numbers. So we were hoping that we could raise them by inflation each year, just to kind of stay comparable. And that took us up, of course I don't have it in front of me, sorry, took us up by about 12%, I believe. Thank you. And then what we would ask for is a a raise yearly so that we wouldn't have to keep coming back. And I'm not sure if any councillors have heard from the community, but I know they've talked to me and said they would like to, and I've suggested that they talk to you. So you may have already heard voices of that degree in the first place.
Any questions from Ms. Pearson? Very well. I would make the recommendation that we follow their lead here, and that staff be tasked with reviewing and updating the program's income eligibility on a biannual basis using the cost of living average. And I think we could include that in our, or we could make a separate motion for that. Ms. Pearson, 246 people accessed this program in 2018, 2019, is that correct?
Correct.
Well,
yeah, no, it is a youth program. I notice a lot in the summer with our camps. So our camps are doing quite well right now, and a lot of the children are part of that program. Mm-hmm.
Very well. I'm going to make a motion then that the Northern Rockies set the fees at the rec center, local or regional parks and public facilities based on community average, and that the leisure access program be expanded to include persons with disability based on verification, and that the leisure access program be updated to reflect appropriate household incomes to 2021 based on the CPI average increase, and that the lifeguarding programs, the Bronze Cross and the National Lifeguarding, remain where they are. Do I have a seconder for that motion? Yes, go ahead.
Would you like me to speak on the disability tax?
Sure, go right ahead.
I didn't know if anybody needed any clarification on that, but at the moment, we were hoping to have some kind of regulation that we could be able to provide some financial assistance to people that did have disabilities, and it was costing them more. And our suggestion was to use, similar to what we're already doing with the leisure access program, we look at line 150. And this one was, sorry, I can't remember the line number on this one, but it was basically already determined by the government. So we felt that was a more fair way to qualify. It would still be similar to the leisure access program, where the first year could be waived by a community program such as family development or the children and family group. I'm totally blanking on the name, sorry.
So you're referring to the Canadian Disability Tax Credit, I think.
Yes, but
On
the first year can often be waived by, or not necessarily waived, but kind of acknowledged by a group like family development,
Right,
or children and families. And then that way, say if somebody was just had a disability kind of come about, that would be their way to have it. Yeah, thank you. Before it actually hits the tax situation.
Very well. Any other comments? Do I have a seconder for my motion then?
Right here.
Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Roper. All those in favor? Carried.
And just to clarify, that did include the disability in that motion, right?
Yes. Thank you. Thank you. Is Mrs. Pike with us tonight?
Good evening.
Mrs. Pike, it is good to see you. Administration report number 47, update of the permissive tax exemption policy.
Yes, and it is good to see all of you as well. We're bringing forward a minor amendment to the policy for permissive tax exemption. Back in 2011, when the policy was originally approved, a lot of municipalities across BC had a boilerplate. And what we found over the last number of years is that we would like to certainly make it look a little bit better format wise, but we also want to be able to go to a 3-year application scenario. You apply with all of your documents in the first year, and then you make a renewal application confirming your situation for the 2 years in between. And so administratively for the organizations, as well as for internally for staff, it makes a lot more sense.
Are there any questions for Mrs. Pike? Very well. Someone like to make the motion? Moved by Councillor Souls that the permissive tax exemption policy be approved as presented. Do I have a seconder? Moved by Councillor Andrews. All those in favor? Carried. Thank you, Mrs. Pike. Admin report number 48, development permit application. Ms. Thompson.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. So tonight I'm presenting admin report number 48, which is related to a development permit application that was submitted to our office on Friday for the extension to the current property located at 4504 50th Avenue North, which we all know locally as Home Hardware. So as I mentioned, on July 9th, Mr. Mold from Demert Holdings Limited submitted an application to our office for a development permit. The property is located in the highway commercial zone in our zoning bylaw, as well as the highway commercial development permit area of our official community plan. Prior to us being able to issue a building permit for the extension that Mr. Mold is planning on building, we do need to get council approval of a development permit. So I have provided a bit of information on basically the legislative framework surrounding development permits, as well as attachment 1 is the actual application, and attachment number 2 are the drawings associated with the application. The current property obviously has the existing retail store on it, which is 661 square meters. And at the back of that building, there's a 60 square meter storage area that is in disrepair, as well as 3 sea cans that are being used to store merchandise. So they're really in need of some extra storage area, and therefore that has driven the application. In addition to replacing the storage area at the back of the building, they are also looking to replace the retaining wall and build a loading dock area for receiving shipments. So I've included in attachment 3 some ortho imagery of the current property, which shows those items that I just spoke to. Attachment 4 also has photos that were taken on Friday of the property that shows the condition of things like the current storage area that they do have, as well as the retaining wall and the parking lot. One of the things we do need to look at when we're considering a development permit application is the conformity to the official community plan. So that information is on page 2. Essentially, the policies and objectives in the OCP are recognizing the importance of maintaining the Alaska Highway Corridor and making sure that things are aesthetically pleasing for tourists and for local citizens on the Alaska Highway Corridor. There's also objectives in the OCP concerning paving and landscaping, which we'll talk about here in a minute. The next thing we have to look at is the application and its conformity with our zoning bylaw. And the zoning bylaw, there's certain sections, in particular section 12, which is specific to development permit areas, as well as some of the more specific sections like section 4 regarding off-street parking, and section 5, which is landscaping. So page 2 down at the bottom where we talk about zoning development permit area considerations, some of the things that we look at is land use and what the current parcel is being used for. We make sure that there's appropriate setbacks. We look at adjacent uses to make sure that there's no conflicts. We make sure that the building and the appearance of the building is going to fit in essentially with, you know, what we are looking for in the downtown area. So those things we've looked at. One of the things that, you know, usually comes up is the parking guidelines. So section 4 of our zoning bylaw does speak to off-street parking requirements. So anytime we do receive an application for a building permit, there is a requirement to submit an off-street parking plan with that application. And our zoning bylaw specifically states that off-street parking plans have to comply with section 4, which are those paving and off-street parking requirements. So the report outlines how Mr. Mould's application meets those requirements. But one point I do need to point out is that currently the parking lot is a gravel parking lot, which does not meet the requirements of section 4 of our zoning bylaw. And Mr. Mould has submitted a request to be waived or relieved of those paving requirements, which is in an email included as attachment 6 to the report. The report goes on to talk about other considerations in the zoning bylaw, such as loading, vehicle access and circulation, pedestrian guidelines, screening and landscaping, and signage guidelines. And of course, at the bottom, there's 2 options. One is to approve the development permit, and the second is to not approve it. I will note that if I'm sure there'll be some discussion regarding the paving requirements. There is a process that we do have through our through legislation and through our bylaws for Mr. Mould to formally request relief from paving requirements, which would be through a development variance permit. I'll open up to questions.
Thank you. After reading this, and thank you for the thoroughness of the report. After reading this, you know, I think we should approve this development permit application, and I think we should let Mr. Mould come before us with the variance for the paving, and make his case for the paving part of this, because if we granted a variance for the paving now, it may affect other properties or other people to come before us in the future, and I think we should consider that separately. Any other comments from council? Very well, I'll make a motion that the development permit application DP 2101 be approved for a 372-meter addition to the existing principal building, including the replacement of a retaining wall associated with Home Hardware retail store located at 4504 50th Avenue North, legally described as Lot 46, District Lot 1535, Peace River District Plan PGP 7421. Do I have a second? Seconded by Councillor Roper. All those in favor? Carried. Thank you very much. She would have known that right off the bat.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Revitalization tax exemption amendment bylaw number 149. Ms. McIver.
Yeah, so in front of council is basically the amending bylaw for your industrial revitalization tax exemption bylaw. So at the last council meeting, council decided to extend the term for applications by 2 years to August 31st, 2023. So essentially this bylaw does that, and it will, once consolidated, basically keep the program as it is, except extend the date for applications.
Thank you. Any questions for Ms. McIver? Very well. We'll make a motion then that the Northern Rockies Regional, Northern Rockies Regional Municipality Industrial Revitalization Tax Amendment Bylaw number 194, 2021 be given first, second, and third reading. Moved by Councillor Andrews, seconded by Councillor Roper. All those in favor? Carried. I know. That's carried. Thank you. Board of Variance bylaw number 195, Ms. McIver.
So similarly, we're just carrying on what we talked about in May. So it was brought to council's attention that we needed a board of variance. Though when we looked at our old board of variance bylaw, it begged some updates. So thankfully, the city of Fort St. John recently did theirs as well. So it was very easy to develop ours. Nothing is original in local government, let me tell you. So before you is a draft of the Board of Variance bylaw. It does differ in some ways from our old one, obviously. In some of the meaningful ways, such as we're no longer a regional district and we don't have directors anymore. They're council members, but in any event, there were some other procedural things that we robbed and duplicated from Fort St. John's that I think will make things a lot more seamless if and when we do get an application to the Board of Variance. So.
Any questions for Ms. McIver? Very well. Councillor Roper, would you like to make that motion?
Sure, I'll make that motion.
And a seconder for that motion. Second by Councillor Souls. All those in favor? Carried. Thank you. Correspondence letter from BC Hydro. Before you is the letter to BC Hydro regarding their crews stationed in Fort Nelson and their response. So in meeting with Charlotte Mitha, we had a discussion regarding their crews. Charlotte Mitha is the executive vice president of operations, and she undertook to tell us that she was going to dedicate a crew in Fort St. John in the event that we had a power outage. Crew would be dispatched and we would have a hydro crew here within 4 hours. That's better than the 11 hours we were without hydro, but that is half of the loaf, and we weren't satisfied with that. We wrote to Ms. Mitha. She wrote back to us, and we had further discussions after that. And she said she would engage with us again after we brought up more points regarding hydro outages in the Northern Rockies. And we're hoping for a successful resolution to this. I'm a little skeptical that we will get much more than what Ms. Mitha has put in her letter. But we did, it was from us, and it was from Fort Nelson First Nations. We made several good points, as well as noting that the mandate letter to BC Hydro from the Minister of Energy and Mines, Mr. Ralston, stated that they would maintain and enhance service to communities, and made particular mention to about First Nations communities as well. And we didn't feel that they'd fulfilled those obligations. We also felt that in the event of a highway closure, they would be unable to fulfill that 4-hour promise they were making. So we continue with BC Hydro, trying to get more of a commitment out of them than what they've put in this letter before. That is about all I have to say on that subject. We'll keep up the good fight. Council information package received for information the June 30th, and council information package July 7th. New business items. Councillor Penny is away, and he is the acting mayor in July, and I'm going to be away shortly. I wanted to make sure that there was an acting mayor in place in the community while we are both absent. So Councillor Andrews has generously offered to act as acting mayor while I and Mr. Penny are out of town. So I'm going to ask council for a motion to allow Councillor Andrews to act as acting mayor for the month of July. Do we have a seconder for that? seconded by
Seconded.
Councillor Roper. All those in favor? Carried. That passes unanimously. Council additions, Councillor Souls.
I'd like to reference a news.
Your microphone, Councillor Souls.
Just like to reference a news article that was put out just a couple of months ago regarding the new forest management in British Columbia, or forest objectives, based on the intentions paper that was put out on its rounds over the last year. And many of us responded to those intention papers. And so what we heard, the BC government came out with a what we heard in a news article. And what we heard was summarized in that in the world of forest renewal, or forest tenure renewal, or forest policy change, communities should have a larger say in what goes on in their regions. First Nations should be actively engaged in the planning in these regions. You should have proponents in your regions that want to be permanent residents and create long-term employment in your regions. As I was reading that, I realized that we sit here with all of those things. We're the poster child for what they say they're looking for. And yet we sit here with some kind of a roadblock or a really drag the heels program going on. So I suggest that we as a council propose to the Fort Nelson First Nation and to Peak Renewables that we all put our name on letterhead and say, we're your poster child. We're meeting all the requirements of what you say the new forestry should look like. Let's get this thing going. See, I don't think that would be hard to accomplish, but we're all sitting here waiting for something to happen. And we need to apply some pressure. And I think and when I say that I think it's all of us together.
Very good. So this evening, just before this meeting, I received a call from the Deputy Minister of Forests, Mr. Rick Manwaring, and outlined exactly those points, Councillor Souls, that you mentioned about the fact that the Chamber of Commerce, the Northern Rockies Regional Municipality, Fort Nelson First Nations, and others in the community are 100% behind Peak Renewables project, and that the ministry has had ample time under Bill C-22 to do their consultation and to reach a conclusion on this. And I said we were anxiously awaiting the minister's response to this Bill C-22. The conversation with Mr. Manwaring was about 15, 20 minutes long, and we touched on several aspects of the forestry business in the Northern Rockies. I gave him a little rundown on how this community has suffered over the years without having a forest industry here. I believe he understood this. I also reached out and said I would be very pleased to talk to Minister Conroy, even though I understand that Minister Conroy is not going to be able to tell me anything that she can't say publicly, but at least it will give her an opportunity to listen to the Northern Rockies and our position on exactly that, the Bill C-22, and it's time to get going on this. We talked about value added, and the fact that Peak Renewables will be harvesting aspen in the area. And the number of people that have come across this office spoke to Councillor Souls, wanting to bring value added to the community. Mr. Manwaring was very interested in the innovation that was being shown by these companies who are looking to perhaps locate here and are interested in this. So the invitation was put out for Minister Conroy to call me. I think it's an excellent idea that we all put our name on a letter outlining exactly what Councillor Souls has said about how anxious this community is and how we would like to get this going. Are there any other comments? Very well. Mr. Councillor Souls, would you like to make a motion that we write that letter? Very well. Do I have a seconder for that motion? Seconded by Councillor Roper. All those in favor? Carried. Thank you. Mr. Barry, Showmobile.
Councillor Andrews, sir.
Oh, I'm sorry. Councillor Andrews, your addition.
Thank you, Jaylene.
Here,
Thank you,
I'll put
Mr.
these
Mayor.
on.
In the spirit of writing letters and making pressure, I understand that BC Parks has a nice big campground that isn't open yet. And there's a lot of campgrounds up around Muncho Lake that are constantly full, very hard to get sites. I think we need to let them know we're not so patiently awaiting them opening up new sites up at Muncho. We're trying to increase our tourism, and the letter needs to be pushed towards them to get them to start opening it up for us. I'd probably not this year, but at the very least next spring. Yeah.
Excellent. Any other comments on Councillor Andrews' proposal? Very well, Councillor Andrews, you'd like to make that motion?
Yes, I would like to make a motion to write that letter.
Seconder, please. Seconded by Councillor Souls. All those in favor? Carried. Mr. Barry.
Thank you, Mayor. In front of you, there's a letter from Fort Nelson First Nations requesting the fees be waived for the use of the showmobile during their annual celebration in August. So I received it late Friday afternoon. That's why it's a late addition, a request to council, given the fact the next regular meeting is not until August. So just for council's consideration in terms of cost, it's initial setup for the showmobile is $523 for the first day, and the subsequent days are $75. And we typically do charge a $500 refundable deposit, damage deposit, I guess. So the costs would be for this particular rental would be approximately $700 if we were to rent it out under our cost structure.
Any comments? Councillor Andrews.
I have no problem with waiving the fees, but I would still like to have the damage deposit.
Councillor Roper.
I agree. Yeah, waive the fees, absolutely. But yeah, we better get that damage deposit.
Any other discussion? Very well. That's a motion then, Councillor Andrews.
Yeah, I'd make a motion to waive the fees of the rental, the showmobile, or Fort Nelson First Nations.
Seconded by Councillor Roper. All those in favor? Carried. Mayor's discretionary charges, $157.50 to attend the North Central Local Government Association Convention. Any comments on Mayor's discretionary funds? Very well. June rec stats. Miss Pearson. She left. Receive for information then. Any council reports? Very well. Other than our discussions with Hydro and Mr. Manwaring, that's about all I have for council reports, which you've already heard. Are there any questions from the media? Any virtual attendees who wish to ask a question? Very well. In that case, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you.